Hello, guys. Welcome to a live pop culture on Deprogram with Keri Smith. We thank you for hanging out with us tonight on a Wednesday night. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Chris. How are you, sir?
Howdy. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to hear your voice.
Yeah, you look warmer than you were last week.
Oh, much warmer. Yeah, it's gotten a lot better here, and I still have the space heater, but it's really just night and day different. So it's good. I no longer have to run upstairs immediately following the stream to get out of the freezing cold. So, um, we're also like planning right now how to get skirting around the bottom so that we don't have to deal with this next winter. I'm like, we're not going through another winter like this. Like we have to fix it. Um, so welcome, folks. I see a lot of people I recognize in the chat. I just want to say, if you're new here, or maybe you've been here once before or something, Mystery Chris and I were talking beforehand, and I was sort of talking about like the reason why we do this show, and it is to critique woke culture in pop culture, woke ideology in pop culture. But it's about more than that. Our Wednesday night show. It's also about things that we find interesting, things that we hope that you'll find interesting, things about the history of pop culture and specific trends throughout history. And tonight's episode is no exception. We're going to be talking about the subgenre of films called Hicksploitation. But I say this because we don't follow the algorithm. We don't chase it, and not to knock on anyone who does. And if that's what they enjoy, a lot of people really are not old school like us. I think they appreciate the stuff that's currently in the news. Whereas we're like, what old thing can we talk about tonight? But the point is, we don't chase the algorithm, and we're not putting out stuff that's like, this week in whatever TV show, this happened and this got smacked down and blah, blah, clickbait here. We don't do it. And we just talk about we do more deep dives into topics that, that the two of us agree are interesting. There are sometimes things that I think are interesting and maybe Mystery Chris would not agree and vice versa. But if you enjoy the show, we are asking that you help us to promote it, just to hit like, even just hitting like on the video. If you like it, helps us with the algorithm, or to share it. And if you have suggestions for crazy old school topics or esoteric things like that, you can always send us suggestions at deprogrampod@gmail.com. Or if you have suggestions for guests who maybe they have a niche interest in some entertainment thing and you think that we would dig it, you can send that to us as well. So that's my little, anything to add there about what we do on Wednesdays?
No, I think that was good. Yeah, we just kind of explore, cultural things, aspects, past and present, things that have influenced a larger culture. And I think it helps us to understand what's going on. And, this sounds cliche, but helps us to understand ourselves because, we've obviously been influenced by the culture. So I like digging deep and finding all those things that have kind of influenced the culture that we were raised in and that we live in currently.
And you have a wealth of knowledge about pop culture and about history and all sorts of things. So it makes it really fun to do this with you.
Yeah, my parents let the TV raise me, so I have a bunch of useless knowledge, and I'm glad I have an outlet for it finally.
Interesting knowledge.
Yes.
So, with that being said, tonight's topic is exploitation. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's a really funny word, by the way. Exploitation most often describes a subgenre of film. And most often when it's being used to describe film, it's being used to describe like grindhouse or horror films, although it has been used in other contexts. And as we're going to look at tonight, there are many TV shows now and reality shows and such that have been described as exploitation. But in a nutshell, if you were describing it to someone, what would you say? It's like basically stereotypes of rednecks and hillbillies. Is that it?
Basically, yeah, more kind of like negative portrayals of the South and Southerners and just how terrible supposedly the culture is.
How scary. Yes. Brentley. Hello, Brentley. He's in the chat. He says, like the hills have eyes. Yes, exactly. Where, some horror movie where people drive through a small town in the South and they end up getting murdered or worse. There are worse things that could happen before murder. Um, So that's what we're talking about. And most often, yeah, people would think of The Hills Have Eyes, Deliverance, which you mentioned, Texas Chainsaw Massacre even, and it's like, oh, there's a lot of scary hillbillies and hicks in the South, and they're real stupid and they're real rapey and murdery.
Or inbred. Don't forget inbred and racist. Racist inbred.
They're racist. They're all the things. Here is I've got a couple articles. Can we start with one of mine?
Do it.
I found a really kind of funny article. This is from NPR. I actually know this guy. I know this writer. It's always funny when you see.
Oh.
Um, I know him from back when I was in the social justice world. But so this is for NPR. So it's from probably, and given that I know him, a leftist point of view. But we're going to read it. The headline is On Hicksploitation and Other White Stereotypes Seen on TV. This is by Eric Degens. And you got a picture there from Duck Dynasty. This is why I say it's like kind of moved into TV in some ways. There are people describing television shows as being Hicksploitation. So on cable TV, there's a whole truckload of reality shows that make fun of working class white Southern culture. They are some of the most popular and talked about news shows too, such as Here Comes Honey Boo Boo and Duck Dynasty. So you can tell this is kind of dating this article a bit. MTV tried cashing in on the redneck TV trend with its own hyped up platform for young Southern kids behaving badly, Buck Wild. It played like a Southern fried version of Jersey Shore. Its stars were a dim-witted crew of young people in West Virginia drinking hard and riding pickup trucks through ditches filled with mud. Then one of them died, along with two other people in a vehicle stuck in the mud. The show wasn't shooting at the time, but Shane Gandy's death was enough to make MTV stop production. I had never heard of this. I've never heard of this show even. Still, there are plenty more places to see blatant stereotypes of white subcultures beyond the Hicksploitation served by Buck Wild. Over on VH1, mob wives are the cliche in-your-face Italian mafia matriarchs. TLC has backwards. Why did he include that? The Italian mafia. That's not Hicksploitation. Yeah. Then he's got a show called Breaking Amish, and he's got My Big Fat American Gypsy Wedding. Those are not Hicksploitation. But now we get to the point of why he's including those other ethnicities and stuff, because he's getting to this point about white people. So he says that's a big pile of the worst stereotypes about white working class people around. And here's the thing. There aren't nearly as many news shows like this about African Americans or Latinos, especially if they are working class. Shows like Real Housewives of Atlanta and Love and Hip Hop Atlanta show off more lavish lifestyles and have been around longer. Late last year, the Oxygen Channel tried to create a new one, developing a pilot featuring rapper Shawty Low, bragging that he has 11 kids by 10 different women. It was supposed to be called All My Baby's Mamas.
Jeez.
The backlash against this travesty was immediate and powerful. Radio personalities complained on air. Harsh coverage came from CNN and Fox News, and more than 30,000 protesters signed a petition against the show on change.org. It worked. Oxygen announced that it would not develop the series. So why haven't these other shows stereotyping white people seen protest just as strong? This is really interesting, right? It's a leftist who's like, I wonder why there aren't protests against stereotypes of white people.
What is this thinking?
He is. I suspect it's because too many folks see stereotypes as a problem mostly for people of color. We've got lots of practice criticizing degrading images of Black and brown people. Activists know how to gather the news stories, book the media appearances, and assemble the petitions to press their case. Advertisers get nervous and programmers think twice. What many forget is that it can be just as easy to stereotype white working class folks and just as hard to scrub those stereotypes off your TV screen. So this is really interesting because it's someone from a leftist point of view who's basically saying, hey, why are we seemingly cool with stereotypes of white people, and how come there aren't protests about it? Now, I'm not saying I agree with his prescription. I don't actually care about stereotypes of white people very much. I don't care about any stereotypes on TV very much. And so I'm not about to pick up my sign and go out and picket Honey Boo Boo. I'm just not going to watch Honey Boo Boo. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm kind of like, well, hopefully people will quit watching that crap. But I think I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny, kind of interesting that this guy was like, "Hey," like he sort of paid attention, "Hey, why is this a double standard?" "Yes, it is, Eric."
And he was fired for that.
We don't care about stereotypes about white people. What are you talking about?
Asking too many questions.
At first, I thought he was going to take a turn in this article where he's like, basically saying we need to have more stereotypes of people. Why don't we have more stereotypes of people of color? It's another way we're robbed.
Yeah, I'm sure there's tons of articles like that, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting one. And then I don't know if you have any. Did you have any articles, or is it?
Yeah, I had some articles.
I've got one more general one. Do you have ones about specific shows?
Well, one of the articles is sort of general, so sort of.
Okay, let's see. Is it the revisiting Deliverance one?
Yes, yeah. The parts I was going to read are
Okay, cool.
about the South in general.
I will bring it up. Let's see.
Excellent. And you're from the South. You're actually like, I'm from Texas, which I don't include as Southwest. We're our
Texas
own
is its
thing.
own thing.
Yeah. But you're from the South.
Oh, I'm from the South.
Yeah.
I'm from South Carolina.
Yeah.
Where we drop the TH.
Which I believe South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union.
Oh yeah.
Civil War. Yeah.
There's a long-standing joke that we're the state most likely to secede. Like, do you get it? Like in high school, most likely to succeed. Anyway.
Wah.
Pun.
Was a joke told in your math high school?
Yes. I thought it was riotous, actually. That's why I remembered it all these years later. I really thought it was very funny.
Guys were some nerds.
Okay, revisiting Deliverance. Now, if you don't know, Deliverance was, and we'll watch a short clip from it, nothing too traumatic later, but these guys are on a hiking trip. It's been a while since I've seen it. Rafting trip, I think. And they meet some hillbillies in the woods, and the hillbillies end up just perpetuating all kinds of violence against them.
Sodomizing them. Yes.
Yeah.
So this article is from Ole Miss, and it's a very good article. It goes into a lot of depth, and it's kind of hard finding a lot of articles that talked about either Deliverance or just portrayals of the South in depth. And this is one that's not really coming from, a angle that, there needs to be, like you were saying, that there needs to be more white stereotypes and stuff. This one actually kind of breaks it down. But I just wanted to read a little bit from, if you could scroll down to the section that starts with 3. A bit there.
Ding, 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 ding.
There we go. So I'm just going to read a little bit. I'll read the part underneath the italicized section. Goes, underclass Southern whites complicate our understanding of U.S. racial dynamics by challenging 2 important concepts, white supremacy and white privilege. The novel Deliverance describes the North Georgia region as the country of the 9-fingered people, unquote. James Dickey's son, Christopher, says that this is because there's so much inbreeding and so many bad accidents in that region that everybody's missing something. In the film's DVD audio commentary, director John Borman notes that people he encountered in Georgia mountains were all hillbillies whose notorious inbreeding he maladroitly, is that how you pronounce that? Maladroitly, explains. This reason I discovered up there is that these are the descendants of white people who married Indians, and that they are ostracized by Indians and whites. And so they had to turn in on themselves, and the strange, hostile, inward-looking group grew up around that history. And as you can see in some of these people's faces, traces of the Indian. Although it's unclear where the director got the information, he inadvertently employed the same rationale used to stigmatize and oppress underclass white Southerners in the past. Actually, I meant to read from the the second section. You scroll up to the second section. This one goes, the South as other.
Hmm.
In his seminal 1985 article about horror movies, film critic Robin Wood discusses how the other in those texts has to be rejected, eliminated, or rendered safe by assimilation. Wood contends that otherness functions not simply as something external to the culture or to the self, but also as what is repressed but never destroyed in the self and projected outwards in order to be hated and disowned. He uses depictions of Native Americans and white settlers in classic westerns as examples of this process, yet strong parallels also exist in relation to the representation of the South. Scholars from different disciplines have demonstrated how the South and Southerners have played the fundamental role of the other in the establishment of an elevated national identity. Historian James Cobb has pointed out the tendency to compare South and North and see the latter as the normative standard for the entire nation
Yes.
can be dated at least as far back as the earliest days of U.S. independence. Geographer David R. Jansen sees this process as internal Orientalism. Film critic Godfrey Cherishry places Hollywood in the role of colonizer, while Southern Cultures editor Larry Griffin argues that there are as many different Americans as there are Souths. Therefore, we need to question why a particular paradigm is chosen and think about the implications of that choice. In the quest for the central theme in Southern history, David L. Smiley suggests perhaps a more fruitful question for students of the American South would be not what the South is or has been, but why the idea of the South began and how it came to be accepted as axiomatic among Americans. The same advice can also be applied to the analysis of representations of Dixie and popular cultures. And then one more paragraph. The stigmatization of a group as the other always implies a relation of power. The negotiation of power and deliverance happens not only on an integral level, but also between classes. The new educated and the redeemed Sunbelt white South needed to construct its own other. In the post civil rights era, African Americans, the other others, seem to be off limits. Hence, what better demographic group to serve this function than the historically stigmatized poor white Southerners? And I thought that was very interesting. And that's something that's kind of highlighted how there were portrayals of two different Souths. Because this article goes on, it talks about how during the Neil Deal, I can't talk tonight, the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt sent out photographers and they took pictures of Southerners. And you know that famous, picture of the woman, with the two kids and she's kind of staring off in distance. She looks
Yes.
very hopeless. Yeah, that kind of popularized images of the South. And there was this portrayal of them as being very poor, but it was still something that wasn't quite evil in a
Yeah.
sense. That wasn't something that started coming along until the 1970s, where you started to see the portrayals of the inbred, backwards, racist types of whites, and how they're that more romantic. I don't want to say romanticized, but that more the portrayals of Southerners as being more rebels, like in Dukes of Hazzard, which we'll talk about
Hmm.
later, how that kind of just gave way to just the single portrayal of whites in the South as just being inbreds and racist, and how that's something that kind of continues to this day.
I think it's interesting because I think one of the things they're saying here is that uh, after the civil rights era, they're saying African Americans as the other kind of became off limits, or it started to become more off limits. And so that there had to be this, you had to find another other to attack as a group, right? And what better group than like Southern white people? Because you could, now that the civil rights movement has happened and white people want to distance themselves from racism, what easier way than to say, oh, like we are the good white people
Mhm.
and we're going to put all these people in the South in this other category. I don't know. I'm not saying I agree with that. That's what happened, but it is when the genre kind of came to be was the 70s, the
Mhm.
60s, 70s.
Yeah, kind of portraying them as a threat to, America, which is again that lasts to this day when the idea of a domestic terrorist is a white Southerner who's anti-government. which is funny, considering like when I go back and watch shows from like the 80s and 90s, 2000s that portray like some southern white guy who's like supposed to be crazy because he believes the government is going to try to control people's bank accounts and try to force people to get jabbed and stuff. Like, to be, that's just, it's funny because you know like how much that contribute to the idea of the South and how much that was tied into conservatism in general in order to get people like myself not to consider any kind of conservative principles and to think that this idea of states' rights is one that only exists because people wanted to keep slaves, which is cartoonish.
Right.
But I just think it's funny now after everything we've gone through in the last couple of years to see how I'm curious to see how people's views on those things have changed. Because, like, I don't know if you saw the, I think it was the third episode. You did see the third episode of The Last of Us.
Yes, I was
How,
just about to say, you made me
yeah.
think of, I wonder which scene you're going to say. Go ahead.
Well, the one where, so Nick Offerman, who's in it, and he plays like a
Ron Swanson.
anti-government kind of guy
Mhm.
who's also gay. And he's having an argument with his boyfriend, I guess. And his boyfriend makes some comment like, "Oh, you think the government's all Nazis?" And he goes, "They are." He goes, "Well, yeah, now they are, but they were back then."
That's exactly the scene I was thinking of. Yes. He's like, "You think the government's all Nazis?" He's like, "The government is all Nazis." And the guy's like, "Well, now they are, yeah." But and I was just laughing. I thought that was so funny because that's kind of like where we're at now.
Yep.
But I'm not sure why you made me think of that. There was something you were saying about the where, how did we get there? I'm missing the little connective tissue there, but there was something you said that made me think of that exact same scene. Anyway, I do think that this kind of the other being Southern white people as an idea, if it started in the 60s and 70s, that it definitely morphed a little bit in the past decade. And it's still there, but it's gotten more specific, and it's now it's very aligned with a certain political party, the Republican Party, and it's very aligned with particular candidates like Trump. I mean, do you think so? Because I feel like that same sort of that hatred of this group as like the other, instead of it just being okay, white Southern people, it's anyone who voted for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
They're treated with that. I mean, they're called deplorables, for goodness sakes. You know, they're the thing that comes to mind for me immediately is that white kid that was the Covington kids that was standing on the steps and enduring, we later found out, a lot of verbal abuse from a group of Black Israelites who were next to him, and was kind of smiling and trying to ignore them. And he was filmed, and we made it national news in this country, the 24-hour news cycle. Look at this bigoted, smirking, white Trump voter. It was this huge, just like a whole culture participating in a cancel mob against this kid. And there's a lot of power behind the stereotype there that provoked that. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
it's ironic that, you know, him and other people on the right were being labeled as the other, but the people labeling them were saying that those people were othering other people. It's like, no, you're doing what you're saying they're doing.
yes.
Like you're treating them like they're, you know, subhuman, and that you're a superior race, which is what you're accusing them of doing to, you know, Mexicans.
Yeah. I'm just smiling because I don't know what you guys are talking about in the chat right now, but somebody's talking about Ernest, who I love. Know what I
Ernest, Jim
mean?
Verney. Yeah.
Know what I mean, Vern? We have to play a clip of Ernest tonight.
Yeah. He always
Yeah.
reminded me of Beverly Hillbillies.
He's so funny. I rewatched Ernest Saves Christmas recently for this Christmas. He's just, it holds up. He's so funny for kids and adults, I think.
See, like the last like charming portrayal of like a Southern guy, like even though he was kind of like not like super smart or anything, but you know, he was like a good guy. And
well, supposedly he wasn't smart, right? Like they played him as this sort of dumb hick, But he was actually very smart because he would do all these impersonations to get himself into top secret clearance areas, and he would come up with a game plan. He figured out how to drive Santa's sleigh. I mean, come on, you can't be a
Definitely a
dummy.
domestic terrorist. Definitely.
Thank you for the super chat, GJJ, $10. Thank you for supporting Deprogrammed. He says, as a Southern Dakotan now in Texas for 25 years, will this offend me? Don't you know? I'll tell you what. You got, oh gosh, what's the thing that my husband says all the time? Because there's a lot of Southern slang that crosses over with Texan slang. There's a lot that's similar, but then there are some things that are really just Texan, and it'll come to me if he's listening. If you're listening, honey, at the gym, put it in the chat. The thing that you say that I think is very Texan. Okay. Is Larry the Cable Guy a positive or negative depiction of Hicks?
Well, he's not funny, so I don't know what category you put that in.
Oh, I think there it is. It's golly. He says, well, we don't say that in South Carolina. He says, well, golly.
Who says golly, though, these days? That's a very old-timer word.
Two sisters and some yarn says, yeah, golly. Yes, that's Texan. Yeah. Yeah. Golly. Okay.
Oh, shucks.
I want to come back to this question from Nerdy Girl. Is Larry the Cable Guy a positive or negative depiction of Hicks? Here's what I find interesting about Hicksploitation, about the stereotype. Is it's both. A lot of times it's both. I mean, if you watch specifically the horror movies where this name Hicksploitation came from, then it's just negative. Then they're just portraying them as, dumb, inbred, violent, cannibal, rapist, murderers, Leatherface, Deliverance, all that. Then it's just negative. But if you look at the hillbilly and redneck stereotype in other parts of pop culture, not just horror movies, but if you look at it in these sitcoms they're talking about, or Larry the Cable Guy, for an example, or even Ernest, it's positive and negative. It's like, on the one hand, it's negative because they're saying, oh, these Southerners are inbred and dumb, but they're also positive because they say what they want. They're authentic. Their heart's in the right place. They're loyal. I would say these are all traits of that part of the Hicks stereotype. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, from like him, or I think of like, Jeff Foxworthy type jokes and stuff. And, at worst, they're just saying, Southerners, sometimes can be a little slow or something, but they're not portraying them as being particularly violent or racist. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think the bad aspect is really all that bad. It's just, again, stereotype, certainly, but I don't think it's really promoting anything that's terribly negative.
Who's the guy? I'm blanking on his name right now. He's in The Righteous Gemstones, which you recommended, and Eastbound and Down, which I love.
Why am I blanking on? Kenny Powers.
Kenny Powers for his real name.
Blanking out.
What's his name? You guys help us out. He, I think, is another great example of this being Danny McBride. Thank you, comedian Danny McBride. I love him. I think he's so funny. I think he's a comedic genius, and the characters that he portrays usually are a great example of this sort of mix of the Southern stereotype of being dumb in some ways and racist or bigoted in some ways, and then in other ways very fair, very loyal, very caring, and very authentic people. Mm-hmm. who say a straight shooter who says what's on their mind even if it's going to offend.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And you still need to watch Righteous Gemstones.
I watched the first episode. We can talk about it later.
Oh, really? Yeah, okay. Okay.
Wikipedia snippet. Bringing up the quote, the reference that my husband recommended for tonight's topic. I'm Larry, and this is my brother Daryl, and this is my other brother Daryl. Yes, exactly. I think probably one of the most famous hillbilly stereotypes in television. Okay. I'm going to pull up my second article, and then we can get to, you've got one more as well, right? And then we can get to clips.
Yeah, we can do that. What's
Here,
this one
let's
about?
see. This is just a little bit about where the name came from, and this is a little bit about how it relates to film, and then with a list of, some of the best exploitation in film. So this is really about horror. So to give a definition, exploitation, the best worst of this awesome and awful film genre, can be scary or funny, which is true. A lot of these horror films, they ride the line. They're both. They're scary and funny. What are exploitation films? It's not a well-defined movie genre. Most people agree that it should include rural Southern scary movies, the kind where protagonists go on a happy road trip, vacation, move, family visit, and find themselves being sucked into a quicksand of crime, mysticism, and depravity. Because those rural Southerners, y'all, can sure be mysterious and creepy. We're going broad with our definition of exploitation. It helps to have some creepy, but funny is good too, as long as it still plays off those over-the-top perceptions of our culture. Heck, there are a couple of cinematic classics on this list, along with some stuff that you'll only find in a bargain bin. And there are a couple of campy documentaries. Things that make exploitation films awesome. Big-bellied sheriffs on the take. Small towns swallowed up by organized crime. Hard time and chain gangs. Moonshine. Souped-up cars. Forked-tongue politicians and businessmen. Farmers' daughters. And then we've got a list here. We can go through some of these later, but I thought that was this is from a website called al.com entertainment. Oh, it's Alabama. It's an Alabama newspaper. We're going to stop there. Should I pull up your piece next?
Sure. You could pull up the time one. But it was funny when I was doing research. I was looking up some articles talking about Southern stereotypes. And there were a lot of articles, particularly from newspapers in the South, that were talking about how so many movies involving the South show people who don't have air conditioners. They're always sweating. Everyone's got a horse and a truck and stuff. It's like, uh-oh, you rich
I'm not going to
man.
give them $1. I can't.
Uh-oh,
Time.
well.
I can't support time.
I ain't got time for that.
Can you get this on your phone? Is that how you read it?
I read it on one of my computers. This one, if I read too many, let's see what happens.
If you can't find it, you can summarize what it was about also. I did want to say hello to, let's see if I can find this comment. Cowgirl Carpentry is here. And she said she did hear the word golly in South Carolina in a supermarket the other day. I can't find the comment, but it was funny. I was like, okay, well, I'll give you that. Maybe some South Carolinians say that.
Let's see. I got some of it, but I'm trying to see what I wanted to read from it. It was basically talking about it, Dukes of Hazzard, and what it says about the South. And it's from Time magazine, so you kind of know somewhat of the bias there. But there's still some parts I thought were pretty fair. But we might just.
Are you going to try to pull it up? Because I can play a little clip while you're doing that.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, play a clip.
Okay. So I don't know if there's anyone who hasn't seen Deliverance. We're just going to watch a little bit. We're not going to watch. Trust me, I don't want to see. This movie is one of the most horrific movies I've ever seen. We're just going to watch a little bit so you can see one of the rednecks. Here we go.
What you want to do with it? He got a little pretty mouth, ain't he?
That guy. He's missing teeth. He's dumb. He's got a Southern accent. He's alluding to wanting to sexually assault this guy they found in the woods. He got a real pretty mouth, don't he? Just really sends chills down your spine and makes you like, I don't put a lot of stock in these stereotypes. So it always surprises me though that some people do. And I guess maybe you would be more likely to if you didn't grow up in the South, if you're not from the South. But I have occasionally run across people who, like when I was moving to Texas, no joke, there were people in California in the entertainment industry who I told them I was moving to Austin. Austin's like super woke. It's a big city. Everything. And they were like, "Oh, you're moving to Texas? Are you afraid?" I'm like, "No." What are you talking about? But I think for some people that like these stereotypes have really done their job and taken hold where they think like everyone is like that, and then the whole I don't know what they think, but it's really kind of shocking to me.
That is
And
shocking. Because
yeah,
I had a friend who moved to New York after high school, and he's telling me how many people like come up to him and say, "Hey, do you guys like ride horses down there in Texas?" And then like these people were serious. So it's like, they really think we ride horses down here? Seriously? I mean,
yeah,
I do, but no, I don't.
you do. Well, now I'm at the point where I kind of because I don't want a lot of Californians moving here. I'm happy to just reinforce these stereotypes, these incorrect assumptions that they have. It's like, yeah, it's like,
Yes, and
you
our
ever seen
horses are
Deliverance?
racist too. Yeah.
Yeah, and our horses are racist.
Stay out.
My horse thinks you got a pretty mouth. Yeah, I just like happy to let them think that. That's totally fine.
Oh,
People in the chat keep asking for this clip,
uh-oh.
so
Clip. By the way, in that first article I read, like towards the end of it, it talks about how the director had mixed feelings towards Deliverance. It was financial success and he did well. But speaking of banjos, he talked about how he wasn't happy how this reflected on banjos, like people's perception of it, because it's associated with, the kid who's, mentally handicapped, clearly, but, they're portraying him as being inbred and he's playing the banjo.
mhm.
And I thought that was interesting. Like, of all the things, like, he's really concerned about the way banjos were perceived after this movie.
Well, it did give banjos a bad it gives that tune a bad name, like, that's all you
Yeah.
have to do now is going ba-da-ding, boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
like, "Ah!"
Oh, and by the way, before you play this, speaking of, you were just talking about that they played that clip with the pretty mouth thing.
Yeah.
I went out it was a few years ago. I went out with a friend. His sister was having a birthday party, and we're all at a bar. And 2 a.m. comes, the lights go on, and I guess one of the guys who didn't know him or her saw her and had been looking at her whole night. He goes up to her. He's totally drunk off his ass. And goes, "You have a pretty mouth."
Oh, no.
She goes, she starts back up. He's like, I'm sorry. I couldn't stop laughing. I wish I knew this was gonna happen so I could have filmed it. It was I just couldn't believe
Fail.
it
No.
happened.
Unfortunate choice of
You think you
compliment.
like watched that movie right before we went out? It's like, here's a good pickup line.
Oh, unfortunate choice of compliment.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Wait. No, this is like a mashup.
Is this a different movie they put? Yeah, because I think it was only.
Hold on. Hold
Apparently
on, let me find it.
the kid in there was. I was reading. I guess he was in another movie. Like a Big Fish, I think it was later on, because I think he thought he's going to become like a big star after this movie, and he didn't. But
Bungalow Logic is really like no, I think that is it. It's been a while since I've seen this. He's like,
oh
no,
yeah,
that is it. That's fine. Okay.
no, this is where they Boko, they play
Yeah.
on each other. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. We'll add it back to the stream. He's like, I'm trying Bungalow. Also, I don't want to get copyright strike. Let's just scoot ahead to here. Here we go.
Keri.
Talk about genetic deficiencies.
Okay.
Does this remind you of Close Encounters of the Third Kind? They're playing the music and alien spaceships playing it back.
A little bit. Yeah. Creepy. There you go. That's all we're going to play, Bungalow, because I always get a copyright strike. I'm trying to get one tonight. Pretty much every Wednesday show we do gets demonetized because of because we end up showing clips from movies and stuff. I mean, that's what we do. So
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs real quick from this article about the Dukes of Hazzard.
can you
from
tell
Time
us the
Magazine.
name of it first?
Let's see. Hold on.
So if you guys have a time subscription, you can go read the full thing later. I can't pull it up on the screen because I don't have a subscription. So
Boo. So it's what did the Dukes of Hazzard really say about the South? If I scroll down quick, so the first messages you get from Waylon Jennings, which is great song, theme song, are also the most essential. Bo and Luke were good old boys, but they were also fighting the system. They were traditionalists, but they were also rebels. The Duke boys weren't political, but they were at least small c conservative. They stood for old ways and ancient traditions. And the show came along at a time when conservatism was figuring out a different way to present itself, not as the establishment, but as the underdogs, the outsiders, essentially repurposing the hippie ideas of the people versus the power into the little folks versus the big government. Quote, First Blood, which came out a few years later, cast Reagan-era icon Rambo as a soldier betrayed by the powers that be, including, like the Duke boys, Vinal, Southern Sheriff. Even the little things, like the Duke's bow hunting, are about anti-government individualism. Poor folks need food, and Jesse don't take that kindly to no government assistance. He'd rather starve. And so that was interesting, again, as we talked about earlier, about how the portrayals of, not what I wouldn't say romanticized, but of the South being rebels, how that wasn't something that was really being demonized, how that they were still protagonists, they were still fighting the system. And I think that was kind of in line with, say, the General Lee and the Confederate flag, because I don't think the Confederate flag really, like the push against that, I don't think that really started until like the 90s.
yeah,
because it was pretty widespread in the culture. And like I found a clip from a McDonald's ad we can play in just a moment.
I want to see that. Can I tell you, this is one of the things. I was one of these woke people prior to 2016, a couple years before that, probably, when there started to be this big push for it. I was one of these woke people making arguments online about what's the problem with removing these flags from everything? What's the problem with removing statues? You know, if they offend people, basically putting people's feelings above facts and above history, and paving the way for emotionally manipulative narcissists and emotionally manipulative narcissistic ideologies to control things. They're saying, well, what's the harm in changing the street name? And what's the harm in doing this and that? I'm not one of those people anymore. And I'm glad you're going to show this McDonald's ad. The flag was not always viewed that way. And being someone from South Carolina, I can tell you it wasn't viewed that way, at least where I was from. There were Black people who also flew that flag and wore that flag. That may shock some people, but that's true. There was at our town square in this little town where I'm from. I was back there a few years ago, and there's a festival. And whenever the street vendors come out, there's one vendor who his whole booth was nothing but the Confederate flag on lighters, on t-shirts, on coffee cups, you know, the flag itself. You could buy a flag for your truck, whatever. It's a Black guy. He ran the Confederate flag booth. Okay. So it wasn't always viewed the same way that it's come to be now, where it's like, oh no, it always means this one thing. I'm not saying it didn't mean that thing for some people. I'm sure it did. I'm sure there were very racist people who clung to it for a particular reason. I know there were, but I don't think that was the vast majority of people. And I didn't grow up seeing it as that. I didn't know it was that it wasn't until, you know, the past 10 years or so, maybe 15, that I started to view it that way, because of the woke world. But before that, growing up in the South, it was viewed as more of a Dukes of Hazzard thing. That was what I associated with. The first thing I ever associated with was individualism, don't tread on me, you know, good old boys, which again, not a racist connotation always. People, they try to say it has one. It doesn't. A lot of good old boys are Black. So I don't know. I just think that's interesting the way now that it's completely taboo. And I was told they have there's a lot of adoration for country music in other countries like Germany, where they have these big dance halls and they all dress up in Western wear and cowboy hats and they enjoy old school country music and they do the two-step and stuff. And what do they have on their walls? The Confederate flag. Because they're not associating with the hatred
like,
of black people. They're
I'm like,
associating with the South.
Couldn't it be another country? I mean, it has to be Germany. Like, does it have to be Germany? I mean, people are going to draw connections there when they shouldn't. I mean, of all the countries,
no, these are like leftist white people. Eventually, it'll reach there, and they'll be taking it down from their dance halls, I'm sure, where they're like, "Oh, we didn't know," right? But I don't think that's the reason why it's on the wall. I think it's because people associate it with Southern culture, with rebellious culture. Somebody in the chat said it's literally called the rebel flag, with individualism. And so I don't know. That's kind of what I thought when I think.
When I was a little kid, I had a more black and white view of the Civil War than I have today. I subscribe to that cartoonish view of the Civil War about slavery. But,
me too.
I knew back then that not everybody who had displayed the Confederate flag or wore it on, their jackets, whatever, were racist or were doing it for racist reasons. That there were some people who just saw it as, like you said, a rebellion. It's a rebel flag. It's a finger to authority. And it's just odd to me. A lot of grown adults these days can't understand that or choose not to get that because they just want to make everything out to be racist.
Yes. It's like, I don't know, there's no nuance. And again, as you're talking, I'm thinking of another. I mean, I have seen people, like I said, I know there are racists who like to wear it. And I know that I'm thinking of this one t-shirt I saw in a grocery store once, and it was this guy and it had the Confederate flag on it. And it said, "If I had known this was going to happen, I would have picked my own damn cotton." And it's like, dude, like, come on. You clearly have a lot of animosity for black people. So I know that happens. I'm just saying it's not always the case. Yeah, there's my husband in the chat sharing an anecdote. He says in 2019, I was sitting with a band and a square dance festival in Germany in the dance hall along with the United States and Texas flag. They also had the Confederate flag. Yeah.
That's so weird.
I think it's just they think what's Southern, and that Dukes of Hazzard, so Southern. And for a lot of people our age, that was the first association we had for that flag. Yeah. Speaking of, for any of the young people who don't know what we're talking about, we're going to play just the intro to the Dukes of Hazzard. We're going to get a copyright strike, so I'm going to have to mute it so we can't hear the awesome Waylon Jennings song.
You just have to sing it for us, Keri.
Yeah. I made up a song about this dog in the dog park. I could do and it goes to this. He's just a good old boy. Never meaning no harm. Todd. His name was Todd. Todd's a good old boy. Never meaning no harm.
Todd.
Beat all you ever saw. He's been chasing the ball since the day he was born.
It's going to be a hit, I tell ya.
It's going to be a hit. Okay, yeah. Amy says I can play a little. Okay, Amy, thank you. Here we go.
Just a good old boy.
Boom. There we cut it off. We'll wait. Okay, so you see him shooting arrows and the sheriff's coming for him. Oh no. They got to jump in their car, which is called the General Lee. They're hit with the ladies. Oh, Daisy Duke.
The law never will. Making their way.
The only way they know how. That's just a little bit more than the law will allow. Okay, the sheriffs are the buffoons, big-bellied sheriffs, like they said. Boss Hogg, The sheriffs are the buffoons, and you root. This is like one of the original anti-heroes, right? In a way, you're like rooting for the guys who get away from the law.
Like the Robin Hoods.
Yeah, like Robin Hoods.
Can you pull up that McDonald's commercial I sent you, please?
Yeah.
I'll show that real quick. But yeah, I've been because I told you that I don't like country music like after 1980, but prior to that, I've been getting into a lot of old school country.
Yes. Yes, Mystery Chris.
I listen to all of Jerry Reed's albums. I love Eastbound and Down. I love that song. Good stuff. It's good stuff. But
I'm gonna make you a mixtape. Okay, here we go.
Oh, is it muted? I think you muted it.
Oh, I muted it from before.
Yeah.
McDonald's brings you all the action and excitement of Hazzard County with their new Dukes of Hazzard Happy Meal boxes. There's a new car every week, and each comes with an authentic set of decals. You can collect all 5 cars and create your own Hazzard County with the Dukes of Hazzard Happy Meal at McDonald's.
Wow.
Cancel McDonald's.
Cancel
They support
somebody.
racism.
Our topics are so old that if we did any kind of boycotting campaign, it would be really old. Boycott McDonald's for this old 1981 ad. That's amazing.
I know. It's so weird to think. Again, it's odd to me that there was a point in time where Confederate flag was just, kind of everywhere. And of course, yeah, some people, were racist, but other people, again, didn't consider it to be a racist thing. It was just everywhere. It wasn't a big deal. But now, ever since Dylan Roof stuff, when he shot those people, that's when they really started turning on the Confederate flag, and then it became a witch hunt, and that's when a bunch of states started taking down their flags and putting up new ones. And Ole Miss got rid of the rebels. That was their mascot, and I don't know if they're like sharks or something stupid now. Which they did a poll. They allowed students to vote, and they voted for Admiral Akbar to replace the rebels. And so, but for rights issues, they couldn't do that. But I wish they could have, the Ole Miss Admiral Akbars from Star Wars. Yeah.
Oh, I was like,
yeah, that's a trap. That guy.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. I've got.
Oh, can you pull up one more thing? Yeah, one more article. Can you pull up the LA Times piece real quick, since this is related to Dukes of Hazzard? So I just wanted to put this in before we move on.
Okay. I have a feeling I'm not going to like this, am I?
I don't know. You tell me. So
why artist Hank Willis Thomas smashed up the Dukes of Hazzard's General Lee?
But wait. Can you guess who he is? Take a wild guess.
Is he the guy that did the arms?
Yes.
He's the guy who did the really terrible statue. I guess you call it a statue art piece of Martin Luther King's and Coretta Scott King's arms, just their arms holding each other, and it looks kind of like a male private part.
Yeah. Because I found this, I was looking at it, and I was looking at other stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, it's the same guy. This guy gets around. People just parading this around. You don't have to read anything from the article, but I just wanted to show the pictures that this is quote unquote art. He said he grew up watching the Dukes of Hazzard, and he was playing with the toys, but never really understood the connotation of the flag. And so he has the car, the General Lee, that is ran into the ground. So it's kind of like, when they always see the car flying in the air and it lands upright on the wheels. Well, he shows it landing into the ground, smashing it, presumably killing everybody.
Wow, look at this. This is very telling. So I guess he hates the Dukes of Hazzard now, and he's making a statement here with his art of the General Lee smashed into the ground. But look what he says. I think this is very telling. He says, for Thomas, 43, these vehicular icons are more than just pop culture lore. As a kid growing up in New York, the Dukes of Hazzard was his favorite show. The General Lee, a coveted toy. I had the car and I had the Bo and Luke action figures, he says, as he surveys the towering charger. Me and my friends, African Americans, we'd play Dukes of Hazzard. My grandmother watched it with me. My mother watched it with me. There was never any mention or suggestion that there was a problem with the context or the Confederate flag. See, this is the thing. For children, it doesn't have a bad context. You have to introduce that context to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think a lot of what social justice people want to do is they want to reinfuse racism into things that no longer have that context, and they want to keep it alive. A great example are these articles that they put out. If you do a search for do a search for words you didn't know were racist or phrases you didn't know were racist, you'll come across hundreds of articles of these social justice articles where they do these lists and they're like, I bet you didn't know that the phrase grandfathered in has a racist origin and you better not use it. And you're like, what? Okay, so first of all, even if you're right, I don't even believe you. But even if you're did have a racist origin, nobody knows that. Nobody's using it with racist intent. So why are you trying to stick racism back inside of that and make it off limits? You're trying to grow racism in the world. That's what you're doing. And I think it kind of sucks because as a kid, as a black kid, he loved this show. It was his favorite show. He emulated the characters. He played Dukes of Hazzard with his friends who were black. He watched it with his mother and grandmother who were black. And he said that they never shared there was no mention or suggestion that there was a problem with the context of the Confederate flag. Somebody else had to poison that for him.
Yeah. It's the same thing with me for like Song of the South. Like I saw parts of it as a kid, like Zippity Doo and all that stuff. I had no idea for any context to it. I just a happy black guy who was singing with cartoon birds. It was like I don't see anything racist or stereotypical about it. It's just a fun little thing. But like you said, they just keep introducing these things. And recently I was reading about how at University of Texas, some students are again making a big deal of the school song, "The Eyes of Texas," which they've been trying to say is racist, even though the school administration came out with a whole report showing the history of it, that it wasn't racist, that there may have been one point where it got performed at a minstrel show, but that doesn't mean it's racist. But so many people who had no idea of the history of it at all for decades have been singing this, and it's been something that's really bound a lot of people together as part of the culture. It doesn't have that connotation of any racist thing. It's not racist, but even if it was, again, it doesn't have that meaning anymore. But yet people keep trying to interject racism and get people to recontextualize it as such, and ultimately do away with it, which they'll continue to do that because that's what they do.
And if you point out that it doesn't have that racist connotation, then they think, see, a lot of these people, they want to see racism in everything and they want to inject it in everything. And a lot of these people, by the way, when I say these people, are white woke people.
What do you mean these people?
What do you mean these people? White woke people. They want to see it in everything, and they see the world as like this false dichotomy. You're woke or you're racist. Well, first of all, I think woke is racist. Okay. But they see themselves as being non-racist. And they think if you're not woke, that you're and there's just these two categories, and they think you can't see it. If for example, you saying that song doesn't have racist connotations, they would say, oh, well, he's in the group of people that are denying racism exists. That's not true. You can look at things on an individual basis. I mean, here's a good example. I love to go to antique shops. I like to look through. Sometimes they have old yearbooks there from the colleges, like UT Austin and other places, the Aggies. And you can look through these yearbooks from the 40s and 50s, and there's some racist stuff in these yearbooks. like they would do, like some of the clubs and stuff, they would have like these blackface parties, basically. Where
a Justin Trudeau party, you say?
A Justin Trudeau party, yes. But it was like a social thing. They were like, I forget what they called it in one of the yearbooks I was looking at, but then they had several of the yearbooks in the consecutive years. So I started looking through all of them to see when they stopped doing that ball. Cause it was just so like, God, when did they decide this is like, hey, all these white people in this club shouldn't like put on blackface and come to and your finest and come to a minstrel ball. Like I think I'm a pretty good, or try to be pretty objective about like, yes, I do see and recognize and know what racism is. And then there are other times when I'm like, no, that thing over there that you're talking about, the phrase grandfathered in or whatever, like, no, that's just, anyway, I'm getting off subject. You got me fired up showing me the General Lee crashed like that. I don't want to see the General Lee like that.
No, which I was thinking about. I know there's always a lot of car shows like where they have like Batmobile and Back to Future DeLorean and stuff. And I'm wondering, are there any car shows that still have the General Lee in it? Like shows that feature pop culture cars? So I'm guessing that's gotten unpopular. Although when researching, I did see how some museums that have it, you're, giving the finger to people who are trying to get them to remove General Lee from their exhibition. So maybe, I don't know. I think they would probably get boycotted, just by the mere fact of having it among other cars from pop culture, they would probably get boycotted. Yeah.
Okay, so what should we do next? I have a clip I think it's a trailer for a movie called Hooch, 1977. Has anybody seen this movie?
It's not Turner and Hooch.
Nope. It's a film I have not seen this movie, but this is squarely in the Hicksploitation genre. Should I pull this one up?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just play a little so we hopefully don't get a strike.
Were you ever offended by portrayals of Southerners you saw in pop culture in general?
Not really. I mean, because I don't know. I think it's just like life is too short to get offended by things.
Yeah.
and some of them are funny, and I love horror movies. I mean, there's all kinds of baddies in horror movies. So the redneck, hillbilly, rapist, murderer, cannibal baddie is a pretty good baddie. Like it as horror movie baddies go. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a horrific film. I love it. I can't help it. I like horror. And so no, I never was like, oh, that's me on the screen. Do I have family members who I would say are maybe fall a little more into the redneck or hillbilly stereotype than others? Sure. And I think that's great. Like, I love rednecks. So some guy tried to insult me on Twitter. What do you say? He was like, oh my gosh, Nuance Bro posted about this, all these trans activists who stormed the Capitol, some state capitol, and were doing chants in the Capitol, right? And I just said insurrection ? And then some random anonymous account was like, really bad comparison ? And then I'm like, okay, lack of a sense of humor ? And he's like, really stupid joke that 45,000 inbred rednecks have told already ? And then I was like, hey, some of those 45,000 inbred rednecks are my family. Like, yeah, I don't think he had anywhere to go. He's like, I like it. It's stupid. Okay, let's see this. Hooch.
In Clayton, North Carolina, moonshining has been a way of life as long as anyone can remember.
That'd be good. In Clayton, North Carolina.
Even back to the days when they called the stuff hooch. It's illegal, it's immoral, but it's so damn good. And just about everyone does it, only some do it better than others.
You're right. There's this like attitude in I understand now why you were talking about the third episode of The Last of Us. There is this other theme that runs through a lot of the stereotype of Hicks and hillbillies and rednecks, that they're very anti-government and they don't necessarily follow the rules or the laws. They come into a lot of trouble with the law, but they're still except for the horror movies, again, setting those aside, they're still good guys. Like they just do a little shining, you know. They're just doing a little, yeah.
And this idea, like people think, oh, why would somebody be against the government? Government loves us. Government wants the best for us. Just do what they say.
I love the fact that there's this rebellious streak in the South.
Yeah. It's like
I especially
America alive, basically.
Yeah, I especially like the flavor of the rebellious streak in Texas, which I think is a little different. As we mentioned, Texas is its own thing, separate from the rest of the South. I really like the independent streak here. Austin excluded area.
That boy's gonna get himself into some deep trouble. Now there's 5 or 6 of us.
Oh, he's a real redneck. He's driving with a dog in his lap, and he's smoking a cigar.
No seatbelt for the dog.
I'm telling you, the place is wide open. I mean, we can take off, we can move in. They won't know what hit them.
Banjo music, check. Overalls, check. With no shirt.
I have to see this movie.
Pick up a piece from what happened next. It was the craziest, wildest, most up and down, in and out set to you ever seen. I guess you could say some folks sure got carried away.
Car chases.
Oh, I'll tell you one thing. I expect you know it already. The good guy wins. Hell, he even gets the girl.
And the good guy's not the cop.
It's illegal. It's immoral. It's so damn good.
I don't have to see the movie now. Thanks for spoiling it, guy.
Looks good, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the funny ones. I thought that was going to be. I do have a horror one pulled up. Where is that? Let's see. Oh wait, no. Let's do this first. Okay, so we did say how it moved into. You can also see these stereotypes in television. In that NPR article that we read, gave a lot of a little more modern examples like Honey Boo Boo and the Duck Dynasty. But I think one of the very first ones that people saw on their screen was the Beverly Hillbillies. This is an episode where the Beverly Hillbillies money manager, I guess, buys them a dress shop. So they are now the owners of a fancy dress shop in Beverly Hills. And this is them arriving to check out the shop for the first time. Oh, no.
Yeah. Streets parked full of cars.
Looks like somebody's doing a good business.
I hope it's our dress store. How? I don't want to work in no dress store.
Now stop complaining, Ellie. Metro, you sure we come to the right place?
Yes, sir. This here is the address that was on those papers you signed.
This here is somebody's house.
Ha ha ha. They're so dumb. They think it's someone's house, right?
What's Rini? You're right.
Well, let's go.
Rini.
Sure, that's a good deal like the name of the lady that Miss Jean said was running a dress store.
If this is a dress store, I'll eat a yard of calico.
Hey, I done her dressmaking in the back room of the house. Maybe this here Rini woman does that too.
Wouldn't do no harm to ask.
Well, I'll see y'all back home.
Now, wait, Ellie Mae. It was on account of you I went along with buying this place. Now, you're going inside with us, and you're going to behave like a lady.
Hey in there. Anybody home?
Howdy there. Is this here Renee's dress store?
This is the house of Renee.
That's the name.
Are you her, Rini? No, indeed. Madame Renee is in the fitting room in the rear.
I was right, just like Ma used to do her dressmaking.
Well, this sure is a pretty parlor.
Here.
Oh, thank you.
Go easy, Granny. Looks like that gassed up cider city folks is so fond of.
Renee, come quickly.
What is it, Mrs. Langwell? Who are these people?
They look like welfare cases.
They look like welfare. Anyway. More hilarity ensues as the hillbillies stick out like a sore thumb, clearly in Beverly Hills, and are dumb and don't understand the ways of the cultured white Americans.
And that show lasted for a while. It's the basic concept's just the fish out of water. We're just taking poor people and contrasting them with, middle class or upper class, which they ended up doing in the movie. I don't know if you saw the movie in the 90s, and they similarly did that with the Brady Bunch movie and to a lesser extent Addams Family, just fish out of water, just contrasting them with modern culture.
Fish out of water, I can see that. But this is very specifically like pushing the stereotypes of hick, hillbilly. I mean, it's in the title. It's very much let's laugh at this, which I don't really have a problem with. So
well, I was curious like how popular this was in the South, because I know, when TV first got started, it started, roughly speaking, in the Northeast and expanded, but it started in cities because cities, where the infrastructure is being built. And so a lot of rural areas didn't get TV until years later. And so I'm curious how much this influenced the North's view of the South on TV, and then contrast that with, say, the news, the way the news was showing what was going on in the South, particularly with civil rights, and how that kind of meshed and again started creating what we have now, where a lot of Southerners being portrayed as just not only dumb but racist and inbred.
Mm. Did you grow up with this stereotype? I mean, you grew up in Texas, so it's like different again than the South.
Mm-hmm.
But did you grow up with like, that white Southerners are all of these things?
Yeah, I grew up with that because there was a lot of movies, and TVs and stuff. And I was a little kid. I was always afraid to go through like small towns in Texas because I thought there was gonna be KKK everywhere because I was watching like all the Donahue and all these other like talk shows where they have like some KKK guy and they end up fighting Jerry Springer style.
Yes.
And so I thought they were much more widespread than they actually were at that time. And I think a lot of that was done on intentionally by media and maybe some feds. But yeah, I did think that a lot of stereotypes were true. And even though like now I think a lot of people in the South, like, yeah, there's still stereotypical aspects about it, but I think if you look particularly at Texas and like smaller Texas towns, they're a lot more, I hate to use this word, but diverse than a lot of people would think. Having a high population of Hispanics and even blacks in a lot of smaller towns. Like I have a friend who lives in East Texas, and he's always talking about like all these black people, and they're down with shooting and Trump supporters and stuff like that. And so it's there's a lot here that I think a lot of people would be surprised if they actually experienced it. But again, they have all sorts of crazy ideas, like we know down here.
And they don't ride horses, and they don't go to shooting ranges, and they don't actually know. I mean, there was a shooting range that we covered when I was in New Jersey. This isn't a Southern thing. When I was working on the show Totally Biased on FX, which was a very woke TV show. And my client, the host, he wanted to do an episode where he went to a shooting range. I think the intent was to poke fun at the stereotypes of these backwards white male gun enthusiasts. So we make arrangements to go to this range, and we get there, and it's black owned. And it's the people who happen to be shooting there that day, it's like women, some Jewish guys. Like it was like nothing was sort of working for the stereotype of what I think he wanted to portray. We ended up doing an episode. He talked to the guy and everything, still poked a bit of fun at him, but it dispelled, I think, that notion of like what, who are gun enthusiasts, who are Second Amendment defenders, and just like getting outside of your bubble and seeing something like that. But they don't go, I don't know. Most leftists aren't going to places like this. I used to love to take leftists to the gun range because a lot of times they would end up really enjoying it, and it would dispel a lot of the myths that they had and the fears that they had. Yeah.
I think a lot of people who are anti-gun have never actually gone out and shot a gun. And if they were, I think a lot of them would change their minds about guns.
But on the other hand, in retrospect, if they don't change their ideology, I don't know if I want them armed. So, like, don't. Maybe I'd just rather fight them on the Second Amendment than have them keep all the rest of their ideology, but also carry. I don't know about that. Yeah. I was just gonna think one other anecdote, but again, that dispels the notion of like who rides horses and who does all this. I know one rodeo star. I know one person who does the rodeo circuit. Black lesbian. So it's like, yeah, not what you would think, but that's I know it's just an anecdote, but the point is there's all kinds of people out there that if you go and investigate some of these hobbies or interests or things that you think are all like, oh, that's all Southern white redneck people. It's like, no, dude, like you're not very informed. So
yeah, and it's just it angers me the lack of curiosity that many people have to actually searching things out, and just knowing how dominant these mono narratives are regarding these things and how unnuanced. I mean, even like the Civil War I was talking about earlier, I went, pretty much all my life not knowing that there were blacks who owned other blacks as slaves in the South.
Me too.
Thousands of them. I didn't know there were blacks that fought for the Confederacy that weren't forced to fight for the Confederacy. Like those little things that, they just don't teach kids these days. And just like, once you learn these things, it opens your eyes. It almost makes you angry too. The fact that these things weren't told to you, that, they presented a very black and white, literally and figuratively, a view of history. And you find out a lot of it's not that way. And
it's not that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I know we kind of jumped away from Dukes of Hazzard already, but I did want to read this article that you sent me.
Oh, yeah.
That we skipped over. Dukes of Hazzard, of course, has faced criticism in the woke era. The woke era. This is a headline from Decider. The Dukes of Hazzard cast stands by their show despite Confederate flag criticisms. Do you want to read from this?
No, you go ahead and read that.
After renewed controversy sparked around the Dukes of Hazzard last month, the stars and creator of the 80s series are speaking up to defend the show. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter today, the show's leads, John Schneider and Tom Wopat, addressed the criticism of their show, which has been called out for its use of the Confederate flag. The Dukes of Hazzard features the flag on top of the General Lee race car, which Bo and Luke ride around town in nearly every episode, cementing the status of the bright red car as a central symbol of the show. It's red? All this time I thought it was orange, like fire orange.
It does look a little orangey. Yeah.
Schneider said that despite the growing criticisms today, he's never heard anyone directly take issue with the Dukes of Hazzard. Quote, I have never had an African-American come up to me and have any problem with it whatsoever, he said. The whole politically correct generation has gotten way out of hand. God bless you, John Schneider. Vulture reported in mid-June that Amazon was considering pulling the Dukes of Hazzard from IMDb TV, its free streaming service, because of the show's prominent display of the Confederate. Really? It's not for the content or anything. Just a flag that was on the car?
Yeah.
Because of the show's prominent display of the Confederate flag on top of the General Lee race car. Wopat, Schneider's co-star, acknowledged that today's generation has a different relationship with the flag. Yes. Who gave them that different relationship? Just like that artist that we just read from, the black artist who grew up watching it. It was his favorite show. He and his friends would play Dukes of Hazzard. He watched it with his mom and grandma, and he said there was never any negative connotation to it or any suggestion that there was a negative connotation to it when I was a kid. But over time, he let people inject it with that for him. And so, yes, these young people have a different relationship with this flag. And I think that culturally, we've probably come to all accept now that, like, oh, it just means this one bad thing to if anyone has it or wears it, or if they ever had it on a car in another decade, like the 80s, it definitely meant this one thing. No, it didn't. So this is the other actor, Wopat. He says, quote, The situation in the country has obviously changed in the last 40 years. I feel fortunate to be living in a time when we can address some of the injustices of the past, but the car is innocent. Although the Amazon news came just last month, the race car has seen its fair share of, I hate this ad on
I
this.
know.
What is this? I don't know if I can even finish this. Decider. We're reading a Decider article. Decider, fix your ads. I'm going to stop reading your article.
Hold on. Let me see if I can put it real quick. See if it works for me.
That was worse than the pulsating oven ranges that I used to get.
So let's see. It just goes on. Next paragraph talking about the Dylan Roof thing where he shoots some people, black people in the church. It said that at that time, Warner Brothers TV stopped licensing images of one of the cars to toy makers. Viacom CBS also removed the series from TV Land following the shooting. Dukes of Hazzard creator, however, has continued to stand by the flag ever since it first appeared on screen in 1979. To Guy Waldron, it's simply, quote unquote, Southern culture. He continues, I had relatives fight on both sides of the Civil War, and we were honored both the American and Confederate flags, Walton said. No one ever connected the Confederate flag with slavery. It was simply part of our Southern culture. Waldron added that he wholeheartedly supports the Black Lives Matter movement and its quest to address racism around the world. The Dukes of Hazzard remains on IMDb TV, where all 7 seasons are free to stream. The popular series, which ran from 1979 to 85 on CBS, later inspired a movie remake in 2005. So yeah, that's the end of the article.
This is just bumming me out. Although there's something positive in the chat. Where is it? Kevin Anderson says, there's someone here in Austin that has a Challenger painted as the General Lee, flag and all. I thought that was pretty brave.
That is brave. I'm surprised that hasn't been like keyed and set on fire.
You must have cameras all over it. Yeah, because people in Austin will do some property damage. Like woke people in Austin.
Confederate man.
That is really brave. Bungalow Logic says Marxist history revisionists gave us this. Yeah, and you know what? A lot of these people who criticize this flag, for example, the Confederate flag, this particular symbol, are the same kind of people who will wear Che Guevara stuff or things that are meant to allude to Che Guevara, like other images of other celebrities dressed as Che, and they'll never even think about what they're wearing. So, you know, what is that symbol? What does that mean? Bungalow Logic says, love this chat. When's our pop culture meetup? Hey, nothing to announce quite yet, but I want you to know we are working on planning a retreat, and hopefully I'll have news on what that is soon. So stay tuned. I'm very excited. And we're going to meet up in racist Texas if you're not afraid to come here.
Bring your Confederate flags.
So silly. Excuse me. Do you have anything else that you wanted to show?
No, I just had a funny clip we can end with.
Let's end with this. Let's end with a laugh.
It's a little risque, just to give a little warning.
Oh, okay. Well, before we do that, I do want to show an Ernest clip. I meant to pull this up.
Okay.
So this is what I'm talking about with Ernest, like how he was simultaneously portrayed as this dumb hillbilly, but, you know, not very book smart, certainly. But he was also very smart because every movie he was in, he was always coming up with plans and different characters he would portray to get things done or to advance the storyline. And so this is him in Ernest Saves Christmas, where they had to get onto this movie studio lot. It's a long story why, but they had to get onto this movie studio lot, and that had a lot of security. And so he was like, no worries, I'm going to play a snake handler and just drive up. And the guy that he's trying to sneak onto the lot is hidden in the back of the truck underneath a tarp. There's no snakes at all. Just so you guys know, the guy that he's trying to smuggle in is in the back. Okay, here we go.
Okay, what's in the truck?
Is this where the horror movie folk be?
What?
I got a truckload of steaks for them horror movie folk.
Well, I better take a look.
Careful now. They be poison snakes. 1 minute, you're a big, strapping, healthy man, and the next, snap, you're dead meat. Heat sick.
I better check it out.
Careful now. They'll knot up on you. Them poison snakes will do that. You gotta be more.
That's probably enough. I don't know if you love Ernest as much as I do.
When I was a kid, I've been watching the movie since.
Oh man,
I always told you that the Medea movies are basically the modern day Ernest movies.
you're right. We should do an episode comparing them frame by frame.
Ernest goes to jail, Medea goes to jail. Ernest says Christmas, Medea's Christmas movie.
You know, one of my favorite parts of doing this show with you, Chris, is you and I have like the Venn diagram of our sense of humor overlaps a lot, and we laugh a lot at the same things. But then the little parts on the edge that we don't share in common, it's always really funny if you show me something live and I'm like, and you know, like you're not laughing, or if I show you something live and it's tickling me and you're just like, still smile.
That might be in the next clip.
It's always funny to find what's on the edge. Okay.
Yeah. If you could skip to the 6:40 mark, this skit is from Kids in the Hall. This is about a 2-minute skit. So I think it's funny. If you're offended easily, then you might not want to watch it. But
we're gonna make you squeal like a pig, ain't we, Bo? We're gonna make this fella squeal like a pig. Squeal like a pig.
What is it that you like about that scene?
I like that it's well written. I mean, it's a very famous scene, and it's famous because of its writing.
Just out of curiosity, are there any other scenes from any other movies that you consider to be exceptionally well written?
The butter scene from Last Tango in Paris, the writing in that is just extraordinary.
Ah, well, it's pretty obvious to me what you like about both these scenes.
Well, I like that they're both well written.
No, I don't think that's it. What do these scenes have in common?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. I mean, the one film's about a journey of self-discovery through the wilderness, and the other film is about a man trying to cope with the death of his wife in Paris.
No. What are the actors in these scenes doing in common?
Breathing life into great writing?
No. What sexual act are these characters performing?
Look, are you heading somewhere with this? Because I really just don't see it.
They're both having anal sex.
Wow. I can't believe that's all you see when you watch that scene. I mean, the anal sex is pretty incidental. I mean, obviously, you just don't appreciate fine cinema. That's obviously what the problem is.
Then I guess I should go.
Yeah, maybe you should go. Yeah, maybe you should go. But please, feel free to call me if you should ever learn anything at all about film, okay? You know, maybe you might want to read Kenneth Turlong's film Semiotics or Dale Steeb's Ass Masters of the Silver Screen.
You're a butt freak.
Film buff.
Butt freak.
Film buff.
Butt freak.
Film buff. Film buff. Man, why is it so hard to find a woman that appreciates film?
that's it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That was in the center of our event.
All right, good. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was making fun of Deliverance, that scene we talked about earlier. Yeah.
There's so many cultural references around this.
I know.
Yeah. Even people who haven't seen the movie have heard "Squeal Like a Pig," and if you haven't seen the movie, maybe you shouldn't.
Every time I hear like Deliverance or something, I just think of this skit from Kids in the Hall every single time. Squeal like a pig.
Oh my goodness! Thanks for showing me that. thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight. If you like the show, please hit like and subscribe and consider sharing it or one of the other episodes that you like. And if you want to support Deprogrammed financially and you're able to, you can subscribe at everything from, I think it's $1 a month. YouTube, here on YouTube, there's memberships, locals, Patreon, Subscribe Star, all those places. I think that's it. Oh, I didn't make any announcements at the beginning. I forgot. February 12th, so February 11th and 12th, my husband and I are doing our second house concert. We're doing 2 of them this time. We are already sold out for the 11th, but Sunday the 12th, we did not realize it was Super Bowl Sunday. So if you didn't realize either and you don't care, and you're in the Austin, Texas area, or like near Georgetown, Texas, more specifically, and you would like tickets, just email me at deprogrampod@gmail.com. There's several people from the chat who are going to be there already. Mystery Chris is going to be, I'm going to use you to tantalize people. Oh, how's that going to work? They're going to see your face.
I'll be in
Are you
whiteface.
still there?
I'll be in whiteface.
Okay. He's going to wear a mask. No pictures with Mystery Chris. We'll just do that. We'll figure this out. I'm sorry. I didn't think about that. Crap. Anyway, let's delete this part. Anyway, you are welcome to join us on February 12th. Email deprogrampod@gmail.com if you want the ticket link. And thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Oh, man. Okay. Thank you to today's sponsor, the Church on the Square of Georgetown, Texas, which happens to be my church. My church is no longer allowed to advertise on Facebook, which is unfortunate because that's how I and a lot of other church members originally found them. They've been told that they violate community standards. There's no details there of what that means, but you guys know the score. Anyway, since they're not allowed to advertise, I'm here to give them a plug. You can find them online at thechurchonthesquare.org. You can also find videos of all the sermons and some other kinds of content on their YouTube page at Church on the Square. You can also join us. If you happen to be in the Georgetown, Texas area, we meet every Sunday at Ken's Guitars, that's Kenz, Ken's Guitars, right on the Georgetown Square. We meet outside, right on the square. Sometimes, if the weather's nice, you might find us there. You might find us outside in front of Ken's. But if you're local, I hope to see you. Thank you.